Welcome to another episode of Chain Reaction, our podcast here that's powered by Konexial. I have my friend Amy Thorn, and let me tell you something about a few things about Amy. And there's some really cool work stuff. There's some really cool personal stuff here that you may not know about her. So she is the executive director of DBM, which stands for Distribution Business Management Association. She oversees the creation and execution of high impact executive forums, including the prestigious Supply Chain Leaders in Action, or SCLA. I'm a member of that. Konexial is a member of that. Our CEO, Ken Evans, is a member of the SCLA. We'll talk a little bit about it and what it is and what it does. For more than 3 decades, Amy has united senior leaders from the world's largest and most sophisticated supply chain organizations to advance innovation, share best practices, and elevate the profession. I have been a part of that. And when I talk about best practices, I can assure you that that is absolutely what she does. She's also the founder and editorial director of DBM Journal. It's a publication that's dedicated to supply chain executives seeking cutting edge thinking on cost reduction, excellence in logistics, and global operations performance. Early in her career, Amy served as the senior communications specialist for EG&G Engineering. She earned Q clearance with the Department of Energy. I'm not sure what Q clearance is, but I'm sure she's going to tell us. And working alongside nuclear engineers, as well as holding a reporting role for PM and the Evening Magazine. Here's what I think is really cool. Amy's also the co-owner and a winemaker for Thornhill Vineyards, where she brings the same craftsmanship and discipline found in her leadership within the global supply chain community. Welcome, Amy, and thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast.
Well, Jerry, I am just thrilled to be there, and thanks so much for that a glowing introduction. And it's nice to hear your life recapped like that. I don't hear that very often,
You
but
know,
you
we
know,
we found a lot of stuff on you on the internet. We'll talk about some more stuff here, but the SCLA is awesome. That's how we got to know each other, right? I mean, Ken, our CEO here at Connexio, brought me into it, and we've got to know each other a little bit. We happen to live not far from each other, but I think what might bring us more closer together is the whole wine thing. I mean, who doesn't love great wine, right?
and I control the whole vertical integration of the supply chain of my wine business, but I will agree. I think, when I look at wine, I look at supply chain, and I look at business, what's the commonality there? Really, it's about community. And Jerry, you know how special and very senior level the community of the SCLA is. And it's bringing people together. So you were talking a little bit about my EG&G. I was in nuclear before I ever went into supply chain. But if you think about a reaction and a catalyst and how they get involved with things, they kind of cause the reaction without necessarily being part of that day to day that makes it all happen. So I love to think of the SCLA in that capacity. You bring the very brightest minds, you and Ken being amongst them, together with the movers and shakers that are running the largest global enterprise companies, and incredible advancements happen and improvements in supply chain and leadership, and even when you look at legacy, what we're leaving behind. So those are all things that I think about, and I think that our group and the senior executives that are a part of that have very much top of mind from day to day.
I agree. I tell you, my wife watches all of my podcasts, and she's going to be like, "Why does Amy think you're so smart?" And and she's very, she keeps me very grounded. You're elevating me a little bit, so I really like talking to you. When you look at the SCLA, what gaps did you see in the supply chain, across supply chain, that made you believe an executive level forum like SCLA was necessary to really help improve best practices and share ideas and things like that?
Mhm. I think it really was early on. GBM was founded in 1992, and the SCLA was sort of came out of 2005 was the first year, and it was the senior vice presidents themselves that really saw a need for a very, very selected, curated think tank where they could come at that very senior level of these large corporations. We're over $1 trillion, 60 corporate members, diverse industries, That was the vision. And the challenges that those global enterprise companies have are very, very different than the under the $1 billion category. Supply chains do have a commonality across all supply chains. I mean, I run a very small supply chain with Thornhill, but it's not at a global level. And so it's really important that you are bringing peer to peer, lifeline to lifeline at that strategic executive level. And it's a different conversation because these individuals don't just understand supply chain, they understand business and they do understand the C-suite language, right? How all of that has to come into commonality and be put front and center for their companies to strategically continue to succeed.
I learned a new phrase. We were where at the Wigwam in June of last year, whenever it was.
Yep,
And they, right to the right of the bar and restaurant there, there's that room, and we had like a little gathering in there with some people. And I think I was talking to, I can't, I think it might have been Michael Jacobs over at
yeah,
Ferguson when he was with Ferguson, and
right.
he used the word course correct, right? He's just like, we have to. So when you talk about that CEO language or that C-level language, like, yeah, I was just like, that's a great term. I'm going to start using it. Course correct this, course correct that.
Yeah.
So I totally, they do understand business and they do understand supply chain. You are 100% correct.
Mhm.
Um, when you look at your career, especially early on, including working, including your work requiring Q clearance, which I want you to tell us what that is. Anytime as a reporter, how do you think it prepared you to lead a global network of supply chain executives?
I think everything we do in our backgrounds does lead us to the next point if we continue to grow and evolve. So, I was a reporter and I love that. So sometimes knowing what questions to ask and to make people comfortable in an environment where they open up, similar, Jerry, to what you're doing on these podcasts. You're a lot of different people, you're very personable, and you get them to open up and
I
then
don't think I need to let
are
you open up.
engaging.
You are so personable. You are so wonderful. I think you're doing great.
Well,
But yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
But
I
then,
agree with you. Like
yeah.
when I listen to you hold some of those sessions where you're interviewing people or you're talking to people, it's like, you're hitting some great questions there. When you're talking to the forum that you have set up on stage. So I could see where your reporter background helps you.
Mhm. No, it definitely does. And then, my dad was a chemist, so I kind of have that right brain, left brain aspect to me. So I think that's when, my early career, I worked for EG&G and, went into the nuclear field, worked with a lot of engineers, and I realized that engineers can have sometimes the same issues that, mid-managed supply chain executives can have as well, in that you can't get too much in the weeds. You have to always be elevating the conversation, your thought at a more strategic level, up above, that minutia that sometimes can occupy us. So I think that's what's so important about the companies that are in the SCLA and why the companies that they're leading are more successful is that they'll be able to, get the right teams into place, but they'll always remember that it is their job to set the strategy, the direction, and to lead because, our people are our biggest talent and to continue to invest in the tools. I think that is so important, that that the leadership give their teams the right tools that they can get the job done, not just effectively, but in a way that will help the strategic vision of their companies.
I think I think a lot of companies forget about that part that you mentioned, investing in their tools, and I think it's critical because when you look at it, the SCLA connects leaders that represent more than $1 trillion of GDP contribution, right? I mean, it's a lot of money, and it's a lot of stuff moving around from point A to B to C and all the way down. What makes the SCLA forum? I know the answers to these, but for the people that are going to be watching this, what makes this forum so effective in fostering the collaboration among all these high profile organizations? And there are a lot of high profile organizations and individuals that are part of the SCLA.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of factors. It's a safe environment. We don't allow analysts, we don't allow press. And that is only because we want people to have candid conversations.
Yep.
Chatham House rule. So what is said within the SCLA stays within the SCLA. Probably why we're a very good, well-kept secret out there, but we're that way intentionally. So it's about creating a community of trust where senior executives can come, let down their guard, and really talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's going on, with more of an emphasis on the bad and the ugly, because so many other associations or events, or if you even look at Gartner and other great organizations, they're always just talking at a very surface level about what's happening because they are concerned. They don't want their competitor to find out. They don't want to talk about that new great technology and how it's moving the needle within their companies, because then maybe their competitor will get that
Exactly.
advantage. So, they're more closed down, as are their teams. Whereas when they come to the SCLA, we are a family, and it's a family of trust. And I think that when they see the way that we've built the culture within the SCLA, it makes them feel very open to have those candid conversations. And that is where the lights go off and the sparks happen. It's when they all share, and you get a room full of 50, 60 of the top executives. So it's not just one voice, it's not just one industry, because what might be a great strength in one industry is a weakness in the other.
Yep.
And if you only stick with your own industry, you become myopic and you are not doing your job if you're at the top, which is setting strategy and, a bigger picture thinking.
I think what you said earlier, and I don't know if you actually said this about the SCLA, but when they're in other environments like Gardner, which I've been part of, I really can't talk about this because my competitor's right over there, right? You don't
Yeah.
you don't let competitors come in. You keep it to like specific organizations that don't have to worry about their competitors coming in, and really diversifying it so that they can speak openly and share ideas and share best practices. And this is what we did in this scenario, right? I mean, I've learned a lot from these from the people that come there, but it's important to let people know, like, the SCLA does not let competitors of members,
Mhm.
join. It's one, like, if you have Coke, Pepsi's not coming in. What do you feel senior supply chain leaders consistently identify as their greatest operational or strategic challenges?
Yeah. I think again and again, you get lack of end-to-end visibility,
Yeah.
and what's driving that to a certain degree. Unreliable data is a part of that. And the constant constraint between building resiliency and protecting margins. Margins rule. So, you don't want to have this risk. And, when you get those black swan moments, then all of a sudden it's a real challenge. And we all know that 2025 had more black swan moments than any of us would have liked. So let's hope
Mhm.
we get that behind us in
Yeah,
2026.
leave
And
2025 in the past,
yeah, yeah. And I'd also think talent is I hear it again and again, talent readiness, are they ready for what's coming up? AI is probably one of the biggest disruptors I've ever seen in the course of my career. I think it's also the most exciting, making sure you get those AI empowered tools in the hands of their supply chain teams is essential, and then making sure that they know how to use them, because nothing is infallible. So, it's you can never take the people out of the equation, but I think that is what some of the challenges are that they're dealing with right now.
Okay. Let's talk about supply chain trends and really transformation in the enterprise space. When you look at major shifts, what major shifts have you personally observed in the supply chain management over the last decade, especially with these large global organizations that are part of the Supply Chain Leaders in Action group?
Well, I really think that, supply chains have really moved from being cost focused linear models to more risk aware network systems, where the speed and the resilience and the decision and the quality matters really as much as efficiency. So that's been a real shift. They're not, sometimes at the C suite level, the supply chain is looked at as a cost center. I think what you're going to see in the future that I am so excited about, and companies, Jerry, like Konexial and others, are really enabling this to happen, is that they're going to be not just cost centers, they're going to be creation of revenue producing creation centers. One of the areas when I look at the SCLA and where we're going as an organization in the future is to start connecting more of the silos. So let's connect the silo of supply chain, with manufacturing. So it helps build that resilience, and supply chain is the silo that owns the data. And they also are the very last point of handoff between the company and the customer. So they're um, being elevated more and more in the C-suite and seen for the strategic importance that supply chain brings. And I really think the execs are really trying to avail themselves of every tool that they can that will help them move that needle and show that sometimes intangible ROI to the C-suite
I love
and the
the
board.
intangible. I love the intangible ROI because it's like so hard to pinpoint, right? And it's so hard to say, "Hey, this is real value." You may know it in your mind, but again, when you said show the C-suite, right? But you have to show them like, "Hey, this is important for us to do." And when you look at, we always talk about profit centers. A lot of places like supply chain have been always looked at as a cost or an expense or what have you to get that product produced, and then somebody's going to go sell it. But when you look at now, value creation and profit centers are really important. Everything needs to be looked at that way because
Mhm.
everything gets so granular for your members and for what they're trying to do across continents, really. And then it comes into one place, just like your wine,
Yep.
right? It
Yep.
comes into one place, and then it's got to get into that bottle, and then it's got to get a label on it. It's got to get on a shelf somewhere, right?
Mhm. And you don't want to be out of stock.
And you don't want to be out of stock, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about executive decision making. What do you think distinguishes the supply chain executives who consistently transformational change within their organizations? Like, there's people that do it well, and there's people that don't do it well. So, what do you think? What do you think distinguishes the ones that do it well?
I really think that the number one, they invest in their people. They do surround themselves with only A players, which is important. They're never afraid to put smarter people in the room because they recognize that that's going to lift everybody up. And they're able to definitely talk the business speak, so understand the language of communication and not get so much into supply chain speak that what they're trying to achieve and attain gets lost in translation. I think that's really, really important. And I think that they know how to bring the very best out in their people and to spot trends. How are they going to not be disrupted, but be the disruptor? And, always be in the lookout for what's a new tool that I can use to move the needle forward.
Right.
So yeah, speaking the language of business, not just operations.
Correct. I totally agree with you. When you look at elements, whether they're cultural, technological, whatever they are, that allow the best play that allow the best supply chain organizations to execute more effectively during disruptions. What do you think those are? Disruptions could be COVID-19. Disruptions could be the tariff situation that we're facing right now, right? Because all of a sudden now everybody needs to be a tariff expert because that impacts supply chain. So what elements do you think allow these organizations to execute more effectively?
Yeah. I think, it gets back to that end-to-end visibility. That is so important. And more, if we look at all of the black swans that happen, you can't just have a single source. So you have to look beyond that. You have to have that built-in resiliency. And you have to think it out very, very long term. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges as we're going forward is, where do we manufacture our products and how are they sourced? And, beyond just those top tier suppliers, what kind of visibility do you have? And, who are those, third, fourth, even fifth tier suppliers that if you have the rights, whether it's a climate problem or if it's a geopolitical problem, whatever that moment is, you have to have the resiliency to navigate through that and to make sure that the supply chain continues to operate. And I think, if you look even at the future, with AI and the amount of data that that's going to take and the energy that that's going to take, that is, I think, going to be one of our bigger disruptions in 2026.
I completely agree with you. I completely do. The problem is how do we use AI efficiently and effectively, right? And because AI is not the magic bullet, but I always talk about how when I use AI, it shortcuts my process by 60, 70%, but I got to put, what God gave me between the ears, you know, thought process to it and say, okay, does this make sense? Right. But it really can be such a great tool and a huge disruptor if used in the right way.
Yeah.
Um, we mentioned DBM Journal earlier when I was introducing you, and it's really become a key resource for executives. What themes and insights do you think resonate most with senior leaders when you're looking at DBM Journal?
Yeah. Well, I think that we always try to put forward in the journal the content that's also matching the conversations that are happening in the C-suite. And the thought leadership of those companies that are moving the needle. I think that's very important to put that forward. The other thing I think that the journal brings that I really love, it's part of the strength of the SCLA think tank, is we do involve the top minds from academia as well. So there's always that aspect. It is, this is what's happening, this is the strategies, these are what the business leaders are doing. But you have the research end of it and the academic and the labs that are actually designing the tools of tomorrow, and you need to have a voice in the room that represents that, because leaders have to be more focused in maybe 1 to 3 years as they're looking out, whereas I think the researchers and the academics can really look at that 5 to 10 to 15 years out, what's going to be influencing that, and how does that conversation come together. So I think when the journal was originally formatted, it was for that. I mean, let's start connecting these worlds so that everyone can benefit. And also, people that are involved in academia and research too can go off chasing a lot of dead ends. They need the direction of business to tell them, this is what we need out of you. This is where you should be putting those efforts. And so I think, that's been sort of a value add, but definitely keeping our finger on the pulse of what matters the most to the top executives and what their thought leadership is. And then giving them, just like you do, Jerry, on these podcasts, an opportunity to bring that thought leadership forward. I think that also happens in the journal.
When you look at DBM and SCLA participants,
Mhm.
they represent industries that are very diverse: retail, manufacturing, aerospace, healthcare, technology. And I'm just summing it up, but there's a lot of different industries that your members represent. What lessons do you think can translate across all of these sectors?
Mhm. Well, I really think, when it comes to visibility, visibility beats speed. I mean, that's what it's about. Resilience has to be intentional. And the data quality will drive the outcomes, regardless of the industry, every single time. And really importantly, and probably maybe the biggest area and challenge is the organizational alignment. If we cannot, as companies and even within the think tanks and the associations, figure out how to get those silos within these large global enterprise companies speaking more together, the supply chain with the manufacturing, with the research, with the sales, planning. This has to start coming together. If we continue to be in these silos and be disjointed, at an enterprise level, particularly globally, the success won't be there as much. So really getting that organizational alignment and recognizing that we all have to come together and pull together. I
Correct.
don't know if you ever rowed in college or anything, but I love that. The boys in the boat, I love that. But everybody has to be rowing as one team. And when you start getting competition within companies, within divisions, that does not serve the individuals nor the organization. So alignment's important.
Well said. So you're a winemaker and
Mhm,
you're an entrepreneur.
mhm.
So what parallels do you think exist between producing world-class wine, and cultivating a high-performing executive community at the SCLA.
I think it's understanding the alchemy in a way that goes into manifestation, I mean, whether or not, it's a grape, and you have the raw materials, it's very similar and, you're picking the grape, but it's the process. So if I had to compare supply chain to winemaking, I mean, I have my grapes, supply chain gets the product, they have the sources, but it's what happens in that transformational process. That's where I think supply chain is so similar. Once the grapes are picked or once the products are sourced, how you manufacture it and how you transport it and ultimately how you benefit the end recipient, of that, makes a difference. I think to a certain degree, one of the greatest strengths in supply chain is, it's the best kept secret. People don't know it even exists until it goes wrong. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Is you just kind of have that. But for me, it's community. So, whether I'm bringing people together over a bottle of wine and I'm having conversation, or I'm bringing incredible minds together in supply chain with, again, curated conversations, that is that's the alchemy. It lies in the people. That's the magic. And, it lifts us up and it allows us to be creative and envision something that our vision would have been limited not to have seen. Um, and I think we need that. We need each other at the end of the day. And I like to do that. I love to bring people together and, see what incredible things great minds can do.
And you've done an exceptional job. Like I said, I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes, so I'm a big fan, and I totally can resonate with what you just said. So, two more questions for you. You've done a lot of stuff. I always like to use the word stuff. Stuff is very it goes across a lot of different things. What do you hope that people remember you by and the impact that you brought in, whether it's supply chain, whether it's the executives that you brought together, whether it's the journal and the information that you give people, or whether it's the great wine at Thornhill.
Mhm. Well, for me, it always will be about the people. It'll be about the people, about the community, and about the connections. And, at a certain point in all of our lives, Jerry, we start thinking about legacy. How do you leave, whether it's the world a better place, discipline a better place? You know, uh, I think it's important that you do that. So we all have limited time, whether it's professionally or personally. I always think it's so important to be intentional about it, to know what it is that you're trying to manifest, to have a goal, to aim high. If you shoot below it, it's better than, not. We have a finite amount of time. And for me, it's gratitude. Like every day, I feel incredibly grateful that I get to work with individuals like you and other executives and just kind of be able to step back and not see what I created, to see the community and what is created out of that and how we move the needle and figure out, how to connect the dots. It's not me that does it, it's all of you that does it. So I love that. And it will trickle down, whether it's to the next generation or it's the next technology. It'll happen.
That's awesome. So here's a question you probably weren't going to expect, and it's one I ask everybody who comes on here because I'd like to know something about somebody I couldn't find on the internet, right? So if I take your best friend and I take him or her,
Mhm.
and I lock them up in a room where I have the only key that opens the only one point of egress. And I say, I'm not going to let you out of here until you tell me something about Amy that she does not want the rest of the world to know. What's that little secret that they would have to tell me in order to get out of that room?
Oh wow, boy, that's a really tough one. Um,
I mean, I know you like wine, and I know you'll partake in a few beverages here and there. I know you're an incredible leader, and you do an incredible job of bringing people together. You have some really great thought processes on visibility and internal alignment and AI. But what is it that you don't want somebody to know that your friends would tell me if I hold them hostage?
Well, I don't know if that I don't want them to know it, but I would say I am an incredible optimist. And I don't look at any obstacles. I truly look at them. I know it sounds like cliche as opportunities. And I think there has to be an infinite curiosity, um, and an excitement about what hasn't, what is on the other side of that door, or you know, where it is. And you sort of, I use my intuition a lot. Maybe that's what I don't want people to know. I'm very, very intuitive. But I think that natural curiosity and optimism lends yourself to that, and you learn to trust that inner voice, that small nudge that says, talk to this person, or to recognize that in our lives, if we're open to it, synchronicity will bring us together with the people that we need to be. And, if there's something that's missing, it's a tool, it's a knowledge, it's within our hearts, anything like along those lines, to just recognize that it's right around the corner, and you just have to open yourself up to the possibility of what can be and who that messenger might be that brings that to you. So I think it's kind of that openness that I have, that you never know, but you know that it'll be there and you have faith.
That is awesome. Like no one's answered that question that way. Somebody told me that they have a secret love for playing the guitar. That they, I was like, all right, but that is awesome. I do have one last question. I have to know this, and because it was so like different. What is Q clearance at the Department
Oh,
of Energy?
okay. Well, that's really easy. Q clearance is just a really top high level clearance. You have to go through all kinds of psychological profiles, and they ask you 1,000 questions, and they study your family. And it's to allow you to get into the room, into those curated conversations, or exposed to things that are top level secret. And you have to be the type of person that can be exposed to that and take it to your grave type thing. So they have to have that trust. So in my early career, when I worked with EG&G Engineering, I worked, as I said, a lot in the nuclear industry, and was privy to a lot of challenges and transitions that were going on at that time. And it also set me up for success, not so much the Q clearance, but just, the knowledge. When I look at the big crisis that we're having now in energy, I think back on, that time, which was decades ago for me, and what I learned then, and recognize that now's the time to take that key and open up what, we can make the future be. So.
Awesome. How can people, if you have an executive that may be curious about the SCLA, if you have someone that may be curious about DBM Journal, if you have somebody that might want to connect with you, how can people find out more information if they wanted to?
Yeah. Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so a lot of people do LinkedIn me. I think that's great.
And
We
you're
have
very active. You're very active on LinkedIn.
thank you. I have to put this on LinkedIn. Once you get it done, you give me a
I,
link.
I'm excited for you to do
I
that.
would I would love that. But yeah, but to be honest, I think probably it's through individuals, whether it's you, Jerry, or others, that say, the SCLA really can bring value to you, and you should connect, with Amy. But yeah, I mean, my email's out there, it's on LinkedIn, and I think that's great. I think it's great to get out in person, to try to be beyond just the four walls of whatever area that you're in. But, that would be the easiest, to LinkedIn me or email me, athorn@dbm-assoc.com. I'm always open for conversations, and great people.